I was like kind of enthralled by his performance.
Yes, it's easy to go down a Patrick Swayze rabbit hole.
Welcome to Rom-Com Bomb, a Sex Ed with DB podcast series where in every episode we go under the covers with a beloved rom-com, strip away its hidden toxic messages, and rewrite the script on love and sex. Flicking the bean, jilling off, menage a moi. All of these are creative and hilarious ways to say masturbation. For 21 days, I embarked on what started as a personal masturbation experiment with one of my all-time favorite vibes, the magic wand. The goal? To answer one burning question. What is the impact of daily magic wand use on my health, wellness, and sexual experiences compared to regular sexual activity and no sexual activity? Spoiler alert, the results were so surprising, they've inspired me and the Magic Wand team to turn this experiment into a full-fledged study. Now 1,000 other people are diving deeper into how consistent self-pleasure affects everything from mental health to sexual satisfaction. Want to see the hypotheses and the results from my study? Head to sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment to check it out. We talk a lot about sex education, but when I'm shopping for products to support my sexual wellness, exploration, and expression, I head to the experts at Lion's Den. Lion's Den is a pleasure product retailer with over 50 locations nationwide and hundreds of your favorite brands. They have everything you need to explore and express your sexual side. Right now, you can use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off your purchase in-store and online at lionsden.com. Follow them on social media at Lions Den Adult on Instagram and TikTok for exclusive offers, deals, and giveaways. Let's talk about a lube I absolutely love, Uberlube. Uberlube makes sex better for everyone by reducing friction and increasing pleasure. Whether you're using it for solo sex, sex with a partner, or both, Uberlube has a long-lasting performance that lets skin feel skin. It has simple, body, and condom-friendly ingredients, is scent and color-free, dissipates when no longer needed so there's no sticky residue, and is recommended by leading doctors. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off at uberlube.com.
Vanderpump Robs is the reality TV podcast that is worth your time. Sure, you could scroll through the same recycled social media takes, but on Vanderpump Robs, I do things a little differently. I break down Bravo's biggest shows like Southern Hospitality, The Valley, Summer House, Southern Charm, and of course Vanderpump Rules. And I do it through a cultural and comedic lens, because reality TV isn't just about guilty pleasures, it's a funhouse mirror of the society that watches it. So if you're into sharp analysis with just the right amount of snark and no silly voices, subscribe to Vanderpump Robs wherever you get your podcasts. And for bonus and ad-free content, join Vanderpump Robs Premium at patreon.com/VanderpumpRobs.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Rom-Com Bomb. I am your host, DB, sex educator, pleasure expert, and rom-com critic. And this week, we are diving into a classic film that gave us steamy dance montages, a forbidden summer romance, and one of the most unexpected portrayals of reproductive rights in rom-com history. And beneath the romance, this movie offers a rare and urgent depiction of what life was like before abortion was legal in America, and the dangers that came with it. And even decades later, it's still one of the only mainstream Hollywood blockbusters to ever take the subject seriously. And to help us unpack it all, we are actually joined by second-time guest Steph Herold, a researcher at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health, where she leads the Abortion Onscreen project, studying how abortion is depicted in film and TV. Steph, welcome to Rom-Com Bomb, and welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
You are the perfect person to talk about this. It is so exciting that we're doing this Rom-Com Bomb series, and we've had on a few experts now to talk about these major issues that come up when it comes to reproductive health and justice in these rom-coms. And I love the kind of like collab that we're able to do here by doing rom-coms, making it fun, but also educating along the way. And so thank you again for being here. Lots to unpack. But before we reveal the film, let's do the trivia teaser. The lead actors in this film had such bad blood from a previous project that one of them almost refused to sign on. It took some serious convincing to get them in the same room. Stay tuned until the end of the episode to learn more about that little fight, that little issue that these two actors had. But the reveal today, we're doing Dirty Dancing. Steph, what is your relationship to this film? Tell me.
For a long time, it was the only film that I had purchased in iTunes. It was actually like the only film I owned.
Very telling.
Yes, so it's absolutely one of my favorite films. That doesn't make it, without its flaws, but I've been watching this film on repeat since I was a teenager. So
Wow.
I would say I've seen it about a schmajillion times.
One schmajillion, please.
Yeah.
Once again, what a more perfect episode for you to come on since you know every single nuance of it. I wildly, this feels like a simulation moment, had never seen this movie before.
Incredible.
I know, before this episode, I was blown away by these montages. I was blown away by the dancing. Patrick Swayze, Jennifer Grey, very hot, very fun. Their whole relationship is montages. There's so many montages in this
Yes,
film.
yes, yes.
The Jewish kind of like summer camp of it all, like
Absolutely.
I love that. But if you are like me and you haven't seen this movie ever, or you haven't seen it in a long time, here is a quick refresh. Dirty Dancing follows Baby, Jennifer Grey, a sheltered upper class teenager who spends the summer at a resort in the Catskills with her family. There, she falls for Johnny Castle, aka Patrick Swayze, a charismatic working class dance instructor. But it's not just a love story. While Baby is learning the mambo, she's also thrown into a crisis when Johnny's ex and dance partner, Penny, needs an abortion and can't access safe care. And here, just very quickly, like, I want to do a little plug for an amazing organization named Carafem, because one of the issues that makes Dirty Dancing so powerful is how it doesn't shy away from real issues like access to abortion. And honestly, that conversation is more relevant today than ever. And I want to shout out Carafem because I've partnered with them in the past. I'm partnering with them to talk about safe, medically supported abortion and how they make it more accessible, including abortion pills by mail in 18 US states and DC. They also recently launched a new program where you can get abortion pills in advance before you need them. And so, if Penny had Carafem in 1963, when this movie is set, Dirty Dancing would have been a way less stressful movie in many ways. And yeah, their work is just incredible. So I had to shout them out. But kind of moving on to our next segment as a kid, where we discuss like, again, you're the perfect person for this segment. What is one word maybe that describes your relationship to this film as a kid when you were younger?
Oh, man, that is a good question. I think the word that came to mind immediately for me is forbidden. I
Ooh,
think
sexy.
I think because I knew it was kind of like I wasn't really supposed to be watching this movie. The abortion plot line definitely went way over my head. I watched it again as an adult and I was like, "Oh, of
Whoa.
course I love this movie." It's like, wow, this is like totally unexpected. It seems like that happened to a lot of people. Like what
Mhm.
really stuck with me was like the romance, the dancing. So it was, what's the word I'm looking for? It was, like, very kitschy.
Yeah.
They were all Jewish, which I knew without them really saying, so that also felt very familiar to me.
Mhm.
I was really drawn to Baby as, like, this rebellious teenager. So all of it just felt very cool to watch.
Yes. Does the marvelous Mrs. Maisels perhaps fall on the or stand on the shoulders of Dirty Dancing? I feel like
Oh,
it,
for sure.
right, with like the Jewish Catskills kind of summer depiction.
Oh, yeah,
Um
like the '60s. Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Um let's talk about what scene defined this film for you. What do you think it would be if there was one scene when you were younger that you so familiar feels like the main thing that really shows what this movie is?
And the one that stands out to me is I mean, there's so many. It's hard to say, like, the it's when Baby walks into the dance and she's carrying the watermelon, um, and she's, like, trying to kind of seem like she fits into this environment where all the, employees are kind of, like, letting off steam and they're dancing in this way that she's never seen
Very
before.
sexily
Yes.
also.
Right, right, and she has only seen Johnny do these kind of, like, very formal dances before with guests, and she just kind of awkwardly says, like, "I carried a watermelon," and then you can see on her face that she's like, "Oh my god, why did I say that?" And I think that kind of moment, just is emblematic of some of the class tensions that you see in the film, where she both, like, really wants to fit in with them because she can see that they're cool, she doesn't totally understand, all kind of the rich girl privilege that she brings to it. And then Johnny says, later in that scene, he says, like, what break everybody works here, and she hadn't even thought about that, you
Right.
know. So I think that that particular scene, I think, helps set the stage for some of the challenges that they face as the movie goes on.
Totally. And I think like we do kind of get a glimpse as to what Dirty Dancing actually looks like. Like this is the opening sequence of the film. They also clearly are very much grinding with each other. Like it's very sexual. And she is a 17-year-old who is very innocent for all, intents and purposes. We see her sister and like,
Right.
she's also kind of innocent. So it's a very innocent set of daughters here. Okay. I know that this is one of your favorite films of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I need to know, what do you like about this film? What works for you? We're going to do all of that before we get into the problematic stuff. So I want to
Okay.
know from you, what do you think about this movie, and how it's aged as you have aged and like what you think still stands up?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely not without its problematic elements, like any movie, right? But part of what I love so much about this film is that the abortion is the reason the romance happens,
Mm,
right? Abortion really undergirds the whole plot. Without the abortion, there's no romance. There's like Penny and Johnny do their dance, and Baby has no reason to really meet Johnny and work together on the dance and do the lift at the end. That none of that happens.
mhm,
And I know from hearing interviews with the writer Eleanor Bergstein that she was really pressured to take the abortion out. They
mm.
really didn't want her to have that in there, and she had to kind of say like the movie would be very boring without the abortion. Like, the abortion access is the crisis moment, right? And I think that's also part of what I love about it is there's no one questioning Penny's decision, right? No one's saying like, "Are you sure? Maybe think about it a little more." Like all her friends, who are really her family, right, are her work family, are really supportive, and they're all trying to figure out how to help her. So I think that is really beautiful, and we really still don't see a lot of that in film. We
Mm,
see much more of it on TV, but very little of it on film. Um, and also, they talk about some of the barriers that are very evident, right? Like they help her try to figure out where to get the money. We still very rarely see that as part of abortion depictions. Um, and that, is a huge barrier today, still, right? I mean, the film takes place in the 60s before abortion was broadly legal, and it's still a big issue. So I think that you can't underestimate how important it is to show that it's not just the legality; it's where she's going to go. She has to miss work. Baby has to learn this whole dance to cover for her. That all of these pieces have to fall into place, so it doesn't just show abortion as something that you want an abortion, you get an abortion in the end, right? Like you kind of that whole staff has to come together to help Penny,
right.
to cover for her. And then there's the whole love story. And I think having a rom-com that has abortion as part of it, where abortion isn't the butt of the joke, it's part of the driving force, is really powerful.
Totally. It makes me think of Obvious Child,
Mhm.
which, you and I kind of discussed before this interview as potential. It's a little, not in the zone of kind of our nostalgia. But I do think that because it is 10 years old, that is also an interesting piece where it's like, that's another good one that I think that we could discuss as abortion being kind of the central theme, but people aren't trying to talk the person out of it. And it's part of the love story. And it also made me think of what almost was in Greece, right? Like
Mm,
Rizzo, like
yes,
almost is pregnant, but then she finds out it was a false alarm. And so that kind of, came up for me when I was watching this film of thinking about other kinds of
definitely.
films that are set in this time that have similar plot lines. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that like the abortion piece here is, and you're again the researcher when it comes to studying abortion on screen, and so you have this encyclopedic knowledge of all the other, times where abortion has been depicted on screen from, the 80s and beforehand all the way up through now. And if you're saying that this is, one of the better depictions, then I think that is telling, because also what happens in the abortion, despite there being so much support and despite, them figuring out, them discussing money, is it is like a botched abortion. Like it doesn't
Yep.
go well. And what do you kind of make, I guess, of that piece of what happens? And she ends up living. But we see bloody sheets, and we see,
Totally.
someone basically say like, oh, he was a butcher and he came in with a knife and he didn't know what he was doing. So like what do you kind of make of that piece of it?
Yeah, that piece always frustrates me a little bit. Like, I understand why it's there, right? Like, obviously, this is part of the history of abortion not being legal in the US, right? At that time. At the same time, there were safe illegal abortion providers, right? So, in another movie, Penny could have gone to uh, a provider who gave her a safe abortion, and that was that. But then, it wouldn't happen. That baby would need to tell her dad what was going on, and you wouldn't have that piece of the conflict either, right? Um, but I do find it frustrating that in order for Penny to have her humanity, they have to demonize the provider. They have to have the provider be this kind of shady character that we never see or never meet.
Right.
They have to use, you see the bloody sheets. They have to talk about the knife. And I think he says, like, I heard her screaming. I couldn't go to her. It does invoke a lot of these um, tropes about illegal abortion that I think are really unfortunate and really, like, don't do anyone any favors, right? Like, it
Totally.
definitely helps to paint a picture of, like, oh yes, Penny wanted an abortion bad enough that she was going to do whatever it took. So on the one hand, I feel like that's helpful. Like, when you want an abortion, you'll do whatever you need to do to get an abortion, right?
Mhm.
On the other hand, I wish you didn't have to throw abortion providers under the bus or repeat this kind of um, mythology of illegal abortion providers as fitting this kind of stereotype.
Right, kind of this, like, continuous rumor that, like, oh, abortion is dangerous, and, things that we know to be true, about abortion pills. Studies have been done that taking abortion pills is safer statistically than taking Tylenol for some people. And, like, continuing to say these truths out loud is so important, because these films, as we see, have real staying power, and, like, people continue to watch them over and over again. Case in point, Steph
Yeah.
Herold.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have the wherewithal, because you're a literal abortion researcher, to know that, like, okay, this is a depiction that, isn't necessarily true. Like, this can be harmful in this way. But I do think that, our parents and people who have been watching these films for decades, we need that continued education and that reminder that, like, this is something that can go wrong. But for most people, when they have the right people who are doing this, it goes well, and people don't regret their decisions, which is so important. Are you falling into a pattern with your partner, looking to change things up but aren't sure how? Me and my partner exit our ordinary with Lion's Den. Lion's Den has hundreds of your favorite brands to help you and your partner reconnect or try something new. From novices to dungeon masters, there are products for every comfort level. With 50 plus years in business, Lion's Den is here to help. Can't make it to a local store? Shop online and chat with a customer service team member while you shop. Lion's Den offers our listeners 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. For those of you who have been in a long-term relationship like me, listen up. I get emails all the time from couples asking how they can change things up and get their intimacy back after being together for 5, 10, 15 plus years. I was struggling for so long to give a legitimate recommendation I believed in until I found Aria. Aria is a service for couples that makes it easy to break out of routine, deepen emotional connection, and energize their relationship with curated experiences called scenes. You will also receive access to the Aria concierge, who's like your relationship's wingman, a real person who fills out your vibe and serves up spicy monthly experiences for two. Plus, hand-picked premium items delivered discreetly to your door. It's super simple to get started. Just take a short quiz about your relationship and the concierge will provide everything that you need to connect and play. Because adults need playtime too. Visit arya.fyi and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off now. let's kind of move into our main segment called That's Problematic, where kind of the first umbrella I want to talk about is kind of zooming out, from everything that happens in Dirty Dancing, but kind of to what you were saying about the writer and what the writer was saying, rom-coms and reproductive justice in general, and how this abortion plot that Hollywood almost cut, right? Like,
Right.
Dirty Dancing is one of the only mainstream rom-coms to acknowledge abortion, and it almost didn't happen. And like you said, screenwriter Eleanor Bergstein fought to keep Penny's abortion storyline in after the producers wanted to cut it. And I just want to talk about the fact that this is still one of the only rom-coms 40 years later to show abortion as a real urgent decision says a lot about how Hollywood treats this topic. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you is this is extremely problematic because abortion is such a common experience. Like 1 in 4 women, people with uteruses, get an abortion in their lifetime. And yet Hollywood continues to erase or stigmatize it in mainstream films or act like it's an anomaly. So can you speak to this a little bit? And especially because of your encyclopedic knowledge of other films that share abortion.
Well, I think part of what you're talking about with Hollywood is that um, there's this sense, and we did some interviews with producers and writers to try to understand why it is that they want to write abortion stories and what they're trying to do when they do that, and what barriers they face along the way. And one thing that I heard over and over again was that people who want to write about abortion have to make the argument that you can use it to further the plot or further the drama in such a way that the abortion is not the conflict, right? But that's hard because there needs to be some kind of conflict to move the plot forward. So what I heard is like a lot of women writers would say, like, we're arguing with men in the writers' room or with women who are higher up and then at the network, that the character doesn't have to feel a lot of anguish about her abortion. She doesn't need to feel punished. She doesn't need to feel really sad. And then they'll say, like, okay, but that's really boring TV. Like, help me see how it can not be boring.
Right. Where's the
Uh,
drama?
Exactly, exactly. So I think there's that piece. And I think there's also this sense that I heard from a couple of people that like the networks will tell them like abortion is really a bummer. No one wants to watch that. No one wants to see that. Like, so a character has an abortion. Okay, well, that's the end of that story, right? If she has a pregnancy, there's like all pregnancy kind of drama and humor that can happen. Once the baby's here, there's a lot of shenanigans that can ensue. But abortion ends a plot. Um, so having to kind of I could see, that they have to do a lot of legwork to try to convince all the people in the room that showing a destigmatized normal abortion isn't boring, that people want to see it, they won't be boycotted, um, and that it will further the plot for these characters and for the whole show or the whole movie in some way. So maybe a little more sympathetic as someone who studies this and also as someone who's like, why isn't there more? Like, there are actual issues here that they're trying to deal with.
Right. I mean, I think that makes sense. And I think that that's why Obvious Child works so well, is because it is the center of the story. It's not a side character. But as we see in Dirty Dancing, it is the device, like you said, that moves the plot forward. So it makes so much sense that it gets more airtime than just like, oh, she found out she's pregnant, she's going to get an abortion, and then that's the end of it. Moving on to kind of another big umbrella that I kind of want to talk about is like class, privilege, and who gets to kind of be the quote unquote good girl, right? So
Oh,
like
for sure, yeah.
Baby comes from this wealthy, respectable Jewish family, and her father assumes Penny must be irresponsible because she needs an abortion. And Johnny and Penny and the folks who work there are working class, and Baby kind of gets to be this hero, even though she's kind of mocked by Johnny in the beginning of, "Ooh, go get your daddy," right, to help, while they're the ones who are actually in trouble. And the film acknowledges class struggles, but it still kind of frames Baby as the one with the power to kind of save them, right? And I find this problematic because it really suggests that like working class people and people who might need abortions have to prove their worthiness in order to get help from, the wealthy doctor, to get help from the wealthy girl to ask the wealthy doctor. Um, what are your kind of thoughts seeing this now with a fresh set of eyes, even if you saw it a month ago, kind of with this frame, and like what's your kind of sense about this whole thing with class and privilege?
Yeah, I think the movie could have made it really simple and really left out some of the complexities and the interplay going on between the staff and the guests. at Kellerman's. Um, but I think it does a couple of interesting things. Like, so baby sister is kind of pursuing one of the staff members, and it turns out, he's kind of a jerk, right? And it turns out that he's the one who actually got Penny pregnant.
He's responsible. Yes.
Yes, yes. So I think there's this, and she learns about this later when she walks in on him with a different, having sex with a different guest. So I think there's some interesting things going on between um, this idea that there's the class interplay, right? So you have like this one multi character who's really a jerk, so he's not kind of the savior, right? But then you do have Baby who's really trying to learn that. She asked her dad for money, right, for Penny. He gives it to her right away, and obviously, right, Johnny makes that comment like, "You're asking Daddy for money," and then she realizes later when she brings him in to kind of help save Penny, um, that this isn't all like fun and games, right? That like this is actually someone's life, and that she's lucky to have her dad. And Johnny tells her, right, like, "Thank God your dad came," and I think she has this kind of class consciousness moment. Um, so I'm curious to like tease out those lines a little bit more, but I think the film really could have done like a very clear cut. Babies, the privileged white girl, these working class staff are the ones who are really like kind of the heroes of the film. It's just recognized, but she both kind of wants to be them at the same time as she's like very aware that she's not totally one of them, especially as she's learning to dance. So I think there's some complexity there.
Totally. Yeah, I do think that ultimately by them kind of ending up together, it kind of evens the playing field because he is the one with the power because he is, the top dancer of this category. And she's the one with the power because she has money. And so
Right.
at the end with the lift and with, them ending up together and the dad being okay with it, I think it does kind of balance this dynamic a bit out. At the end of the day, like, she is a child, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about the age dynamic, right? The
Yep.
age difference here, because Johnny and Baby's relationship might just be iffy just based on the facts, which is like she is a sheltered 17-year-old, just graduated high school. And Johnny is at least, we don't know, but in his mid 20s is kind of the
Sure.
assumption. And so this movie frames their romance as, empowering for her because she is the one that kind of gets to help with the abortion. She gets to help save the dance. She gets to, do all of these things. And I'm kind of wondering, is this actually okay? Like, would this storyline work the same way today? What do you think?
That's a good question. And I think that's a really good point, and I think a really underexplored one. My guess is it would work today, if only because it's like kind of a summer romance, a summer fling.
Uh-huh.
I think if he were any older, it would be a big red flag.
Right. Major. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, this part of it obviously, like, is problematic because it romanticizes this gender age gap and like this power imbalance in this way. And I think that, like, if they could have done something just slightly different, like they could have made her just like a sophomore in college and it would have
Mhm.
felt just like she wouldn't have been a literal child. I just think that 17, I think because we have so many associations with 17 to 18, which I don't agree with this, right? Like 17 is basically 18. All of a sudden at 18, you can buy cigarettes, you can watch porn, you can go into the army, all these things. Whereas at 17, you're too young. But I do think her character is written in such a way and she performs it in such a way that she is innocent. Her literal name, her nickname is Baby.
Yes.
Like, how else could you hit the
Yes.
nail on the head there?
Yes. Well, I think what they wanted to do is have her be at this transition moment, right? Like she talks about wanting to go into the Peace Corps. She's like, just at the end of high school. She's about to start college. The world is her oyster. Like I think they very intentionally made her at this moment in life where everything is about to change for her. And then it turns out the summer is also part of that.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, Steph. We are towards the end here where we're going to do actually a rewrite of any part of the film, of any part of the story, of any part of a character. How would you tell this story today if we wanted to even focus in on the abortion piece? Like, what do you think would be different that would feel like either, you know, Penny got more agency or, would you change the age gap? Like, Would you change any part of their love story? Like, what would you change?
Honestly, I feel like we get very little from Baby's mom in this movie.
Mm,
And I would really like to it's so much like the father-daughter conflict, like, we get some of that, but I would really like more I would love more interactions between Baby and her mom, like, I'm sure her mom has had some experience with contraception or abortion or obviously pregnancy, um, and she's kind of like a nothing character, so I
right.
wish that there was a little more of her, and obviously, I have 2 sisters, so I always love when sisters are depicted on screen, and I love all of the kind of, like, petty conflict between Baby and her sister,
Mhm.
and I would just mostly wanna see more of that besides, like, looking for iridescent lipstick together, you know?
Sure.
Yeah,
The real
I think
stuff.
those yes, yes. Yeah, I think those are my 2 pieces, and obviously, the abortion if this was a movie made today, I think it would definitely be about seeking out abortion pills,
Mhm.
and trying to find the money to order them online and, helping staying with Penny while she has the abortion. I think that would be a very different type of film, but I could see that happening, right? Instead of it invoking these kind of tropes about illegal abortion being scary.
Totally.
Um, and it makes me wonder, like, oh, maybe in that circumstance, like Baby's father would be a lawyer and he'd be worried about the legal implications for Baby as the one who ordered the pills. Um, I could see all of that kind of machination, but it would definitely need to have all the dances, the pachanga, all of it.
Include all the dances. I
Yes.
gotta tell you, I was shocked by how good the dancing was, I have to say. I think my rewrite would be that it was not a botched abortion and that it
Mhm.
just, like, went well, but there were kind of, like, real symptoms. So, like, if there was heavy bleeding afterwards, like, that's why the sheets were bloody, is because, like, that's just a normal part of an
Right,
abortion, and, like,
right,
she didn't have a pad or something, right? Like,
right.
certain things where it wasn't depicted in this such a scary way that, "Oh, this was a butcher," right? Like, I hated that word. Like, I
Yeah,
hated that that was introduced into the story. I
yeah,
just wish that it was, yeah, it went okay. Like, it doesn't even have to go great. Like, it just was a
right,
doctor and it went okay is, like,
right,
fine. And I think that simple change because this movie is so beloved and because it's seen by millions of people and I'm sure still every year, like, I just wish that there was a positive association with the outcome of the which there was because she lived, but there should be
right.
more than just she lived, so it's good.
Yes, right, and she also has this throwaway line where she's like, "In the doc, I can still have kids," and you're like, "Of course you can still have,"
Like,
like
yes, you
right.
can.
Right, right. I'm sure you're wondering because she has had this clearly unsafe abortion. And part of what I've always wondered about this film and what I've always wanted to study is like, what do people remember about the
Mm,
abortion? First of all, do they remember abortion is in here at all? Because I definitely didn't until I saw it as an adult. Then what do they take away? Do they take away like all the love and community and care around the abortion seeker, which is part of what I love about this film? Or do they just remember that the abortion was dangerous and Penny almost died? Right? And the last thing I would love to ask is like, does this enforce for people that when abortion was illegal, it was unsafe? Or does this make people think like, wow, all abortion is unsafe, no matter the time period?
listen,
So
Steph, you know my email if you wanna do a collab study on this. This is exactly up Rom-Com Bomb's alley, so this is very cool. I would love to, yeah, see if you actually did something like that. That would be awesome. Um, Steph, we gotta rate the film after we've seen it. 1 to 5 bombs. You started at 0. Where are you ending?
okay, I would maybe say like a quarter of a vom. The
We
problematic
we
pieces to this.
converted you. Okay. I love that, tiny bit up. I know that this is one of your favorite films, so even just a quarter, we'll take it. I will move mine from a 3, I'll say, to a 1.5. I think, like,
Okay.
the class stuff, and I think the age I'm just so sensitive to
Yeah,
the age gap thing. I think, like, all of that, and I do think that the abortion stuff, there's only a few things that could have made it a little better. Overall, happy with how it turned out. And again, this is 4 decades old, okay?
yeah.
Like, mostly these films age very poorly, and this film did not in a lot of ways. Um, Before we give you next week's trivia teaser, let's share more info from this week. So, who almost walked away from this film? Jennifer Grey was so put off by Patrick Swayze from their time working together on a previous movie that she initially didn't want to take the role of Baby at all. It took some serious convincing, and even a screen test where Swayze personally apologized to get her on board, and thank God she did, because can you imagine this film without them? I cannot.
Definitely not. And, once I interviewed Eleanor Bergstein, the writer, and I asked her, I asked her what Patrick Swayze smelled like, which to
Oh
me
my God.
seems like a totally legitimate question. And she was like embarrassed on my behalf. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
oh my God, I'm going to hide in shame forever. So we'll never know. I'm sure he smells very good.
Oh my guess is like sandalwood or something.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Never
Okay,
know.
all right. Steph, we got to read next week's trivia teaser. Coming up next week, this famous rom-com made history with an unforgettable proposal scene inside Tiffany & Co. The first time the legendary jewelry store ever allowed filming inside its flagship NYC location. Before that, only one other iconic movie got a taste of Tiffany's magic, but they were only allowed to film the exterior. Any guesses on what's going on? Make sure, if you have guesses, go to our IG broadcast channel on IG at Sex Ed with DB Podcast. Share there. And if you have a rom-com that you remember from growing up that you want us to cover on this show, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on Spotify. Steph, thank you so much for joining us. What a treat.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun. Had the time of my life, you mentioned.
Oh my God, I can't believe you did it.
Sorry, I had to do it.
So good. Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our producer is Sadie Leegee. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. If you have a rom-com you remember from growing up and want us to cover it on Rom-Com Bomb, submit it to us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and leaving a comment on Spotify. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast. See you next time.